As Mike said, my name's Steven Valdinger. I'm an IT user support analyst based in Ohio at Kent State University. I've been doing IT for about 12 years now, PowerShell for about 3. And if you talk to anybody that knows me personally, they will tell you that I am seriously addicted to this stuff. I love talking PowerShell. I love teaching people about PowerShell. I love learning new things. So I'm really excited to show off toast notifications in Windows 10 for you guys. And hopefully you guys can glean some interesting tidbits, maybe some new ideas to use in your environments and leverage toast notifications to help you guys alert end users, alert yourselves. There's just all kinds of stuff that you can do with these things. So we'll step through this and hopefully you enjoy it. I'm going to move this out of my way. All right. As you can see on the screen here, they're more than just annoying pop-ups that you see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, mostly when you get email, things like that. You can add them to your monitoring platforms. You can use them to set reminders instead of your calendar. You can abuse the PowerShell engine with them, and you can stop babysitting things. If you've got long-running code or tasks that you sit around and wait on them to finish, automate that stuff, guys. Just walk away from it and get a toast notification when that long-running script ends, things like that. Enough rambling about slides and things like that. Let's dive into some code real quick. All right. The first thing I want to talk about to you guys this evening is abusing the PowerShell engine. I use the term abusing lightly. This stuff is baked into PowerShell v5, and that is engine events. If you look on the Microsoft documentation, there's a couple of different ones. There's engine events that you can use for the actual engine itself, for WMI, and also for custom events that you create. An example of using engine events for the engine itself, as you can see here, we're going to do something when PowerShell.exe exits. There's also an onIdle engine event that you can act upon. I don't really see the use for toast notifications on idle. You will get a lot of them. Every time that PowerShell pauses to switch between steps in code or just sits there, that onIdle event is firing, and that can lead to a whole lot of toast notifications if you're using it in that manner. I don't recommend it. Also, during exit, the scope changes for PowerShell. So you have to re-import the module burnt toast, and we'll talk more about the burnt toast module here in a second. I just want to fire this off real quick. But in order to get the toast notifications to actually work, make sure that you explicitly import module burnt toast prior to running your register engine event code. And if we copy this out and bring it over to a console and run it, you'll see that it has created a PowerShell exit event. And if you type exit, you'll get a toast notification down here in the bottom right hand corner. It says PowerShell exit, whatever you're doing is done, and PowerShell is exited. These are good for long-running scripts, scheduled tasks, things of that nature where you're not sitting in front of the console to see them finish, but you know that PowerShell is exited. And you can collect information, you can do all kinds of good stuff and really decorate that text however you want. You can just make it simple. Hey, this exited, it's done. If you're creating directories or files, you can have counts with successful creations. You can collect the errors and toast on, hey, I created X number successfully, but these 7 failed. Different things like that. I've mentioned burnt toast a couple of times now. The previous meetup that we had for this group was from Josh King, which he just happens to be the author of the Burnt Toast module. A couple of months ago, I was really looking for a way to alert my Tier 1 guys that printers on our campus were running low on toner, and they are notorious for not having their email open or their ticketing system open. While that is largely a management issue, I wanted something a little more in their face that says, hey, this needs taken care of. So I started Googling around trying to figure out I could use PowerShell to do a toast notification, and I stumbled upon the Burnt Toast module, which pretty much does everything I wanted it to do, and I didn't have to lift a finger to write any code aside from the code I actually needed to write to toast on what I wanted to toast on. So if you haven't checked it out, I'll put a link to his module, to his GitHub at the end of this presentation. It's out there in GitHub right now. You can download it. It's on the PowerShell gallery as well. So if you're running PowerShell v5, you can just install module Burnt Toast, download that, and kick the tires on it. There's all kinds of great commandlets inside of there that you can use. And actually, I can just show you all the different kind of stuff that you can do. Git command. So this is all the stuff that he's got baked into this thing. You can do context menus, progress bars. You can change the icons that it's using. You can change the sound that's being presented. By default, it uses the default Windows notification sound, but if you want something a little bit more in your face, like when a toner goes low on campus, for example, it blares a really loud alarm, annoying sound at them, which is really embarrassing in the room that they sit in. So they make sure that they get that notification real quick and shut it off. So that's how you get the Burnt Toast module. And now I will show you how to do some even cooler things with it. I mentioned that engine events, you can do custom things with it. Custom events can be created by using register engine event with the source identifier, and then creating an action that happens whenever that source identifier gets referenced later. So we'll go ahead and we'll register this new engine event with the source identifier of test. And my action, I'm going to create a toast with a new header called engine event test, and the text will be event.messageData. You'll notice that I haven't defined event anywhere. Event is a automatic variable of register engine event, and message data is a property of that variable. And also it writes to the screen output of the event object that it creates, so I'm just passing it to null here to minimize that output for us. So we'll run that. And then whenever you want to get toast notified on a certain event that has that source identifier, you use the new event commandlet and reference that source identifier that you used in register engine event. And then you'll use the message data to write whatever you want in the toast notification. So if we run that bit of code, you'll get engine event test, which I defined up here in the header, and then the message data, which I defined in the actual event itself. So if you've got code that does several different things, or you want a toast notification for specific steps so you know where it's at in the process, you can use the engine itself to let you know when those things are happening. The next really cool thing you can do is bolt toast notifications to your monitoring platforms. I'm sure a lot of you have something like an elk stack or Nagios, or in this example, I'm going to use Grafana. But toast notifications can include buttons, and buttons can perform actions. Right now, they're limited to opening files and URLs, but with a little bit of work, I believe that you can also run custom code against them if you so choose to go down that path and figure that out. So I'm going to create a couple of properties for my button. I'm going to give it an ID, which is required. The content is going to be the text that is displayed with the button, and then the argument, in this case, I'm just going to go out to the demo site of Grafana, and I just picked a random metric that will open a web browser to that specific metric when you click the button in the toast notification. And then I define my button with my properties. I create my header, again giving it a default ID of 1 and a title of service degradation alert. And then again, I'm splatting some properties to keep code smell down here. I give it my button, my text, my header, and then I'm changing the logo here to the Grafana logo. So if I run all of this code together, I get a toast notification that says, hey, there's an issue. If I click this View Metric button, Google Chrome is going to open, and it's going to take me directly to that panel that has the alerting metric. So if you've got a CPU that spikes, as in this example, or a disk that gets too full, or anything else like that, you can link directly to that in your alerting platforms. Reminders are another thing you might not have thought to use Toast for before. You might think that your Outlook calendar is the way to go, or telling your phone to send you a reminder or whatever, but Toast notifications can be just as useful. So with this, I define a couple of parameters. I have my title, my text, and also a time for when I want the reminder to happen, seconds, minutes, or hours. And in my process block, I'm actually starting a job, so that if I'm in a PowerShell console, but I want this to stay out of my way, it'll run in the background as a job so I can continue to use my console. I'm using a diagnostic stopwatch, and here I'm just converting my hours into seconds, and then I add them all together to get my total seconds, so that I can use the stopwatch elapsed total seconds property to fire off the toast once the total seconds reaches the specified time that I have when I fired off the command. Again, I wait for it to elapse, I stop my stopwatch, I create my header again, and then I create a new toast. So we'll do 10 seconds like here, and we'll say, actually, let me grab all of this. There we go. After 10 seconds, I got a toast notification that says, I need to get eggs on the way home. This could be anything. If you need your morning coffee reminder or whatever, you can use that for whatever you want. But reminders are a great thing to use toast notifications for that you might not have thought of.
Hey, Stephen, can I break in for a second there?
Absolutely.
Hey, I just wanted to say, I sent a message out on the chat, and maybe not everybody's seen it. If anybody's got some questions for Stephen, now would be the time to get them in here. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned in the toast alerts that you could have buttons. and we went to that Grafana thing. The link that you did, that was an HTTP link that you pulled that from?
Yep.
So what about links to log files?
Absolutely. You can do files just as easy as you can.
You just need the
Yeah, exactly. If we go out here and create just like a new dummy dot, I'm gonna delete all this. Yeah, if we just put some data in this, we can. There we go. That's ugly, but it'll work.
Yeah.
Oops. Ah. It closes right away because it's not a true. Yeah, there it goes.
Gotcha.
It's ugly because it's a CSV that I borked, but yeah.
Yeah, you did that in 12 seconds. I get it.
Yeah.
There's a question. I don't know if you got the chat open. If not, I can read it to you. Terrence is asking about your reminder and using the using variable, and if you can explain that.
Oh, okay. So let me open that code up. There we go. So script blocks execute in a different scope than the rest of your code. It's kind of like, it's similar to using invoke command. The remote computer doesn't know anything about your remote variables or your local variables on the remote side unless you send it to them with like a using statement or an argument list. Same concept applies here. Start job is actually a different run space and a different scope, so it has no idea what those variables are unless you explicitly tell it to use them with a using statement, or you can build a param block inside and pass it like PS bound parameters or however you want to do it. Using has been in PowerShell since v3, and it's the simplest way to define remote variables. So that's why I'm using it.
I didn't see other questions in there, so if you want to just go,
okay.
They'll come up as they need them, but you're doing awesome, man.
All right, cool. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is encryption. If you use BitLocker, you know that it can take a little while for the encryption process to complete. And if you're impatient like I am, you don't want to wait around for that to finish up. So this script can run locally or take a computer name. And if you take a computer name, it creates a session to that remote computer, and then it will go out and grab the BitLocker encryption percentage value off of get BitLocker volume. And then after it reaches 100%, you will get a toast notification that, hey, the BitLocker encryption is completed. And then in the end block here, I'm just cleaning up the session if I had one, since I'm just going to run this locally. It should run really quick. I don't think I have. Yeah. Let's just get BitLocker. Yeah. My SSD is already 100% encrypted, so it fired off right away that encryption is complete. But it's pretty useful if, you've re-imaged somebody's computer and it needs to be BitLocker encrypted and you don't have the up to 45 minutes to wait, depending on how big the volume is inside of it. You can just kick this off, tell it what computer to reach out and talk to, and then it'll let you know via a toast notification when that encryption process is finished. This does have to use PowerShell remoting, so that's got to be set up in your environment. But that's something everybody should be using, I think. All right. Toner levels on printers. This is a really stripped down version of what I'm doing here on campus. On campus, I've got a CSV file created that has names and IP addresses of all of the connected networked printers on our campus, and I just loop through those one at a time, check the toner levels, and generate a toast on each one. If something falls below my required minimum, I alert at 5%. So here I'm just creating an object of all the different toners that you could probably have in one of your devices, black, cyan, magenta, and yellow for a color device. I'm going to go ahead and pull out those colors and loop through on the note properties. And if the value is less than 10%, I will create a toast notification. And if anybody wants to see what my actual script looks like, just let me know. And I think I've got a sanitized version of that floating around that I can dig up real quick. As you can see, based off of my values here in my object, my yellow toner is at 5% and needs changed. This one's alright, this one's goofy. I had the idea the other day when I was looking at an old script I wrote that was using TObject to send output to a log file and output to the screen at the same time. I'm like, man, why am I not outputting a toast notification and writing to the event log like a sane person would do? So I wrote this quick and dirty function called newtoastoutput that just does just that. It writes to the event viewer, and it also sends a toast notification to the desktop. So you need a couple of parameters for that. You need your input object, what you want to send in the toast, and what you want to write to in the event log. You need a source, and you need an ID. First thing we'll do is import the burnt toast module. It's kind of redundant, but it's in there. And then we check and see if the source already exists. If the first time you run this code, if the source doesn't exist, it's going to create it. But on subsequent runs, if you use the same source, it's already going to be there. So instead of throwing red everywhere, we just say, hey, let's suppress that and just write directly to the event log. I write to the application log explicitly in this code with the source that I specify as a parameter. My message is the input object, which is a string, and then the ID that I want to give it. So in this case, I'm going to use some dummy text as my input object. And we're going to use a ttoast as the source, and we're going to give it ID 222. As you can see, there's my toast notification that has my dummy text inside of it. And if I check select, I think I want last one. I've ran this a couple of times, so I want to just grab one of them. Yep. Where should it be? It's in the event log as well. It's good to write stuff to the event log, especially if you set up subscriptions and forwarders for your events so that everything that your PowerShell code is doing is being dumped to a centralized server, so you have one single pane of glass to look at all your logs, only one endpoint that you have to connect to a monitoring server, things like that. It's really good to write to the event log for all of your logging needs, and this script does that pretty well. And then also, if you need to, you don't want to check the event log every time the script runs, but you need to know it's done, you get a toast notification as well. So it kind of takes the hunt and find out of those operations. You can also do it with Pure.net. You don't need to use the burnt toast module. If you're in environments where third-party modules are kind of frowned upon, or there's a really heavy vetting process that you have to go through, to get those things approved before you can use them in your environments, you can do it with Pure.net. You need a couple of things. You need a title, you need your message, of course, and then you can use your logo as well. I'm setting it to the default burnt toast logo that ships with Josh's burnt toast module here. That way we at least see something in the screen. But if you specify your own logo with the parameter, it'll override, so you'll get whatever you want to see. There are a couple of different toast notification templates out there. If you Google C# toast notification templates, there's a Microsoft Docs page that has several of them available. Let me see if I can't pull that up real quick. C# toast. Yeah, there's a link to it on this link here. I'll just throw this in here. That way we have it in the repo for later. But as I was saying, there's a whole bunch of different templates that you can use that change the audio and do buttons and things like that. So if you need a more complex .NET example that has all of that real fancy stuff that you can do with toast, like progress bars or buttons, there are templates available on the Microsoft Docs site that you can copy and put inside of here and change as appropriate. But inside of this particular template, I'm using the title as one of the text blocks, the message as another text block, and if you wanted a third line, toast notifications do support a third line of text. So if you do need a little bit more information to be sent along the way, you can use 3 lines. But in this example, we'll just use 2. In 1803 of Windows 10, they changed the way toast notifications fire. You're now required to use an app ID. And by default, this one is in the registry. I don't have the location handy at the moment, and Josh has a really good blog. This is actually mostly his. I was talking to him on Slack a a little while ago while I was prepping for this talk. I'm like, hey, I've got this idea for .NET Toast, and he links me like a bunch of his blog articles and a talk that he did with a bunch of code, and he's like, there you go. So I shamelessly took most of that code from him and wrapped it up in a nice function to show off to you guys. But you do need an app ID in order to make this work. And then at the end, we can just call my function here. We'll give it my title and my message. And we'll just run this. And I have red text. Why do I have red? Oh, I didn't grab everything, did I? There we go. That's better. So that's all the demo stuff that I have put together, but I am absolutely open to questions, or if anybody has like, man, this is a really cool thing, how would I do this? Fire those at me too, and we'll just kind of do stuff on the fly and figure it out.
So first off, Stephen, thank you. I love that. That was awesome. I have questions. You know, we don't have to limit it to the chat. If you guys want to open up mics and we can just not all step on each other, no reason why we can't all just chat. There was a question in the chat going back a little bit. Someone wanted to know, what is T-Toast? I think you had that in one of your demos there.
Let me see. What is T-Toast?
I think it was.
Yeah,
I think it was in your T object.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is literally just the source. So if you look at, let me do this. If you do get eventlog, we'll do log name application and we select first 10. So as you can see here, we have a source property. That source is just where the event came from. It's the same thing. I just named it T-Toast in this example. You know,
Gotcha.
if you're running a script and it's doing a particular thing, name it appropriately. Name your source appropriately. It can be whatever you want. That's just what I came up with for this demo.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I understood. So you had gone through examples earlier, and you had pop-up notifications, and I was thinking of examples. So basically, if I have a box that we use for scheduled tasks, you know,
Sure.
a central box, all I basically need to do is install Burnt Toast module on there.
Yep.
Maybe come up with a boilerplate block of text, block of code that I basically add to the end of any one of my scripts that run, that basically says, you know, send a message to X machine to say script or scheduled task that does X completed, and there's my notification for when a scheduled task is completed.
Yeah.
Something along those lines, right?
Yeah,
It's that simple, right?
Yeah, it's that simple. You're going to want, if you're running the code from like a central box where all your scheduled tasks are, and you want to notify on a different machine, you're going to want to use PowerShell remoting for that, A, and B, you're going to want the Burnt Toast module installed on the remote endpoint so that you're running all your Burnt Toast notification calls on the remote side and not on the central server itself. It's a client-side thing. It's not sending a Toast notification over the network to an endpoint. It's telling the remote endpoint to notify based on what it's got installed.
So is that the setup that you are using for when you run your
Yes.
printer toner alerts and stuff like
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
It's just sending data, and then the endpoint is figuring out what to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. You can use it if you don't want to install burnt toast on a bunch of machines. You can certainly do just burnt toast on your scheduled tasks box and then use implicit remoting to send it across. You can do session equals new PSSession computer name blah, and then on you can do something like this. You can do something like that in your code so that later on. So basically what I did here was I created a session to a remote endpoint, just a computer named blah, which leaves PowerShell.exe running on that remote machine. And then I imported the burnt toast module into that running PowerShell.exe session. And then I imported that session back to my local endpoint, and I prefixed it remote so that now when I run new burnt toast notification, well, it would be new remote burnt toast notification. So what importing a PSSession does when you have a module imported on the remote side is it creates a shortcut to that module in your modules folder with just pointers back to the remote side. And you don't have to use a prefix, but a prefix is really handy to let you know that, hey, this is running somewhere else, actually. I don't have this locally. So yeah, you could use implicit remoting to do your toast notifications if you don't want to install burnt toast all over the place.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and then of course at the end you want to clean up your sessions with get PSSession and remove PSSession.
Someone had a question about. I guess the idea here is the delivery guaranteed? He wanted to know if a machine is logged off, would a toast notification happen in the past come up on their machine when they log in?
I've never tested that. That's not something I really have to worry about in my environment, just because my machine is always logged on and my help desk machines always have somebody at them. So it's not really something that's crossed my mind. I would imagine that yes, they would get queued some way, but I would have to do some digging and then come up with a real good answer.
Well, I think
my gut is yes.
Well, I think the catch would be there is that you have to be able to initiate the remote session, right?
Right.
So if the machine's off, then it would fail because it never set up the session. If the session is on but the user's not logged in, possibly.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It depends entirely on how you're sending them.
Yeah. So guys, we are ending at 10 minutes early here. And that by no means means that we have to end. Like I said, if you guys want to open up mics and ask your own questions, you're more than welcome to do that. If you have something you want to throw in the chat, we'd be happy to pass it along too. And if you just want to BS about something not related to this talk, we can do that too. But we're kind of finishing up here, but I want you guys to feel welcome to chime in with any questions you have here. Steven has definitely said whatever things you guys can throw at him, he'll try to figure out on the fly here if possible. So here's your chance.
It doesn't have to be toast related. If you've got something else that has popped into your brain that maybe isn't toast related, fire away.
Hey, Mike, could I hop in?
Sure.
I have two questions. My name is Majdi. Nice to meet you guys. Thanks for the talk. I was wondering, I had asked the question earlier about that T-Toast event that was being written into the application log. How is that being handled? Was that in your code, or is that part of the module that it automatically will write into the application log whenever there's a toast that happens, or?
Yes and no. Hold on 1 second. Let me pull that up. So I'm defining the source that I want it to be as a parameter of my function, and the ID that I want to give it in the event log as part of my function.
Oh, and then there's a write event log.
And then from there, there's a write event log that says, hey, put this in the event log in the application log with my source and my ID. So I'm not changing what log name I'm writing to. It's always going to be application. But I am changing if I need it to be a different source or a different ID. It can be that. That's good in like try catch scenarios. If I try something and it's good and I want to write that it's good to the event log, I can do the source with a different ID than if it fails. Right. That way I can report on it later. Or a different source entirely. I could have a success source and a failed source and two IDs that correlate. So that's how I'm handling it.
Gotcha. Thank you. You also had mentioned that you, for your help desk folks, you have that script that runs and monitors your printer toner levels. Yep. So how did you implement that? Is that just they just literally run the script and it just keeps the PowerShell window? Yeah. How does that?
Let me see if I have that. There it is. Let me see if I can find it on the GitHub here. Where did I talk about that? The 13th, I think. Yeah, here it is. So yeah, a lot of this is regurged from a couple of months ago, but let me see if I can't pull this in for you here real quick. There's a whole lot of... There it goes. Let's pull this into a new file so it's a little easier for us to digest, shall we? And we'll give it some... Yeah. So this runs as a scheduled task that runs at the top of every hour on my print server. And basically this is how it does it. I feed it a CSV of my information and my SNMP string and then the threshold that I want toast notified on. And then the computers are the computers that I want the toast notifications to go to. I'm using this particular demo script uses snmpget.exe, but I rewrote the production script that I have to use the oleprn.olesnmp class. So I don't rely on a third-party executable to do this anymore. I discovered that after I wrote this code and then after I gave this talk. It was like in the in-between that I found that, and I'm like, oh, well, now I'm going to do it that way.
Right.
To get rid of this. But that's how I'm doing it, and I'm just feeding it OIDs that are for the model specific for me.
And you have a block of code within here that will remote PowerShell into their computers and then, invoke the toast?
Yeah. So right here in this for each, I add all of my low values to an array, and then for every computer in that computer's parameter, I'm invoking to that computer with this script block that says, hey, toast, here's my here's my args, my toner alert for the friendly. The friendly name is, the DNS nice name of the device. Which toner is low, and then the value that it's at.
Nice. Excellent. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Yep, no problem.
So, guys, I'm going to take a second here to just plug a few things real quick. First of all, I got to say thank you so much to Steven. I think that was amazing tonight, dude. That was awesome. So thank you so much. A couple of quick notes. I'll be speaking at the PowerShell Summit, and I'm preparing for that talk. I'm going to be doing a talk on AD health checks and automating AD health checks and the whole monitoring. And I'm basically going to try to take what we saw tonight and merge that into the project that I'm working on, along with another gentleman named Greg Onstadt, who's on this call with us. We're working on this together. We would love anybody who's willing to participate in that project and help develop some more health checks for Active Directory. I have a repo out on GitHub. We'd be happy to share that information with you. One of the reasons I mentioned it is Greg has written some scripts recently that write events to the event log. So if anybody needs some examples of how that works, even if you don't participate at all, you can just browse our code, look at some of our scripts, and see how we wrote event logs to the event, wrote event notifications to the event log. Also want to remind everybody that if you appreciate this stuff, if you haven't already, get on our meetup, but also join Steven, myself, and the others. We're on the PowerShell Slack channel. We have a Raleigh sub. Join us in there. We talk about this stuff all month long, and it doesn't have to end tonight. Steven, believe me, Steven and I have chatted up quite a bit the last few weeks. He's definitely willing to help people if you got questions, problems, things like that. So hit us up on Slack. As I mentioned, hit the repos. This was recorded. We're going to get that out onto YouTube eventually in just a few days, and we're going to ask Steven for a copy of his slides and his demo code, and we'll get that out in our RTP-SUG repository. I'm not kicking you guys off. I don't want you to think that I just wanted to get it in there before people disappeared. Keep the questions coming if you got them, or if you wanted to switch to another topic, we're here for that. So I'll give